Good evening. Tonight is Tuesday, March 2nd at 7:30 p.m. This is the Planning Zoning Commission. Tonight we have a public hearing and we have a general meeting after the public hearing. We are in room 213 in Town Hall. Jeremy Keating, the Director of Planning Zoning, and myself, and we're also on via GoToMeeting as a hybrid situation. So we're going to get started right away. The first on our agenda is the continuation of public hearing regarding the business site plan application number 194H, as in Harry, special permit Felix F. Callari, Inc., doing business as BMW of Darien, 136-140 Ledge Road. Excuse me. We opened this hearing 2 weeks ago or last week? 2 weeks ago.
February 9th.
February 9th?
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
And that was the applicant's presentation at the time. And tonight, we're going to continue on with finalize the applicant's presentation, the changes that have been made, the peer review for stormwater and traffic and parking, and then any members of the public that wish to speak on this.
Fantastic. So I'm not going to read the rest of that paragraph into the agenda into the record because it's already in the agenda. So I think our applicant is Wilder Gleason, represents the applicant.
Steve, I was going to say,
go ahead.
One question that came up at the end of the February 9th meeting was Jim Rand's question relative to if some things are shifting to Mini down the street at 154 Post Road, I believe is the address. Would that affect the Mini special permit or site plan application? So in between the last meeting and this meeting, I've read through the Mini file, which is business site plan 276/special permit for Mini of Fairfield County. There were no specific commission limits or restrictions on the number of employees that go to work there, the type of vehicles that get sold there. So because that prior approval for Mini had no limits or restrictions on employees, the roles of the employees, or the types of people, there's no need for a subsequent application.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Sure thing, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy. Wilder Gleason with Wilder Gleason Law representing the applicants. And I'm going to ask, there's one other thing. I had applied seeking approval under section 1056, which pertains to service stations. And upon discussions with Jeremy Ginsburg, I want to withdraw that part of the application, as we've never sought approval under that in the past 35 years. And Jeremy and I had a discussion and came to the conclusion that it was not necessary. So the section 1056 section of our application is formally withdrawn because Jeremy deemed it unnecessary. So tonight, I'd like to ask Craig Flaherty to review the changes to the site plan which were submitted in response to the comments of Michael Galante and Joe Canis. And I think that will tee it up so that they can then give their reports.
Just for the record, I wanted you to expand that driveway you put in the sidewalk. Somebody got my thumb. There it is. Brilliant. Go ahead, Craig. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. For the record, my name is Craig Flaherty, Principal and Senior Engineer with Redness and Mead. For the applicant, we prepared civil engineering documents, one of which is on your screen now. I'll go to it in a second. On the drainage side, Joe Canis of Ty and Bond provided peer review comments on January 29th. The nature of the comments were technical in nature, asking us to provide a few more calculations to confirm the efficacy of our design, resolving some discrepancies between the plans and the calculations, and providing some additional detailing to assist through construction. We provided responses to all of those technical comments on February 11th. And subsequently, Joe Candace completed his review with a correspondence dated February 22nd, where he said everything looked good from his perspective, but you can hear that from the horse's mouth. There really is nothing to show you in terms of substantive changes in the plans. The stormwater management system is really as it was described previously. You also received peer review comments from Mike Galante of Hardesty in Hanover. Those came in on February 4th. We responded to those comments in correspondence dated February 11th, and we did add a few things worth pointing out to the site plan. So I've zoomed in to the front of the driveway as it is adjacent to Ledge Road. The request was to install a, see if there we go, to install to propose a sidewalk that would come from the sidewalk along Ledge Road into the site up to the front of the showroom. And we've done that here, as you can see on the site plan. We've also added a stop sign, stop bar, and double yellow line at Mr. Galante's request. And we've also provided a little bit of, here we go, a little bit of wayfinding indication. That'll probably be augmented, but what you've got here is a sign that says service department ahead, so someone knows they should continue on if they're going to be dropping off their car. And then back by the gate, which really segregates the public portion and customer portion of the site from the employee portion of the site, we've got a little sign, employees only beyond this point. So those were the edits requested by the peer reviewers, and that's really all I had to show you at this time.
Sounds good enough to me. I think the sidewalk is a great idea. I think the stop bar is a great idea because people do sometimes kind of that without slowing down. Okay, including myself. Who's next on the Wilder Gleason, Craig Flaherty, then Michael Galante. Are you here? Where's Michael? There he is.
I'm here.
Hey, Michael. We're going to ask you to talk about your peer review stuff.
Sure. And I apologize. I'm on my cell phone. My computer's telling me the meeting hasn't started yet, but obviously it has on my phone. So if you see a smaller me, I apologize. But I'll just go through my my February 4th, 2021 review of the BMW application. I focused on 2 items within that document and that application, which was the traffic report prepared by the applicant's traffic consultant and our review of the site plan prepared by Redness and Mead. Generally speaking, the site itself will have many changes. Obviously, that was described in great detail at the last meeting. We had a lot of discussion, not me in particular, but watching and listening to the commission and others. Many of the changes are to address concerns with the condominiums in the back, noise, circulation, and so on. I will focus on my part of it, which references the site plan itself. I offered some suggestions, which Craig just talked about, which is being added to the plan, which was simply, stop sign, stop bar, double yellow center line. The driveway exists today. They're not proposing any changes. There are no options to change it. The driveway works quite well today as it is to Ledge Road. I see no need to change. From a traffic perspective, yes, this analysis was conducted during the pandemic. They had data from sales and service prior to that, and they used that information. They compared it to information provided by ITE. And bottom line is the site traffic as a whole, at least during peak hours, is not really changing from what it is today versus what it will be tomorrow if this application was approved. And the modifications to the site were implemented. A couple simple steps. The square footage of the buildings will increase by about 9,300 square feet, but about 5,000 square feet of that is really the arrival area for customers to come in the morning and drop off their cars. So that takes up a fair amount of space, and I would agree with that approach. I've had experience with that type of a layout for car dealerships, and it makes a lot of sense. Employee numbers will decrease by about 10 people. So there's somewhat of a reduction in activities for our staff. yes, there's some staff moving to the mini site on Boston Post Road, and some sales and back and forth and services coming back to this site on Ledge Road. The number of service bays will increase by 1 from 29 to 30. Trips added to this site itself, about 17 trips, and they looked at it in different ways, but that was the largest number as far as site traffic being added. In essence, that increase in volume on Ledge Road, and specifically this driveway, is not going to change how it operates. So we're comfortable with the assessments, the references, and the volumes used by the applicant's traffic consultant, John Canning. And we really don't have any other comments beyond that. We feel this is, from a traffic perspective, perfectly fine. We made some comments about, installing signs to have customers not go beyond a certain point. That's in place, or will be in place. So that's my summary of this review, and I can certainly answer questions now or later on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. The one thing I want to do relative to signs, and you just made something reminded me. Once you get past like the where you drop off your car, you can't get to the back of the lot, right? So is that the sides where you're saying no customers past this sign, this spot?
Correct. They have fencing out there today, and I'm sure they'll certainly have it set up where customers will not go beyond that drop off part of the building in the back of the sales office.
Right. So I forget where we are with that, Wilder or Craig.
Sure.
I mean, I know you can't go back there today.
Yeah, we're gonna keep that. I'll just highlight that again. So the this is the customer portion of the site in front by the showroom and the service entry and drop off. Currently, there is a gate and a chain link fence, and we're replicating that at the end of this new addition. So there'll be a gate there, there'll be a fence there, and there'll be a sign at that point which says employees only beyond this point. So
no one can ever go past that end of the proposed addition.
that's not the intended use of the site.
Okay, great.
I'm sure someone will figure it out at some point, but these things happen.
But you can't drive your car back there. Okay. And then when you talked about the addition to the building, the increase of 9,300 square feet, that's basically the tunnel where the cars go in, right?
Yeah, that one I just pointed out is the 3-lane bay for the folks to come in, the customers to come in with their cars to drop them off for service.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any commissioner have any questions for Michael Galante at this point? If you do, you can turn your mic on and raise your hand. Okay, great. Michael, you're done. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody. The next we have up is Joe Canis. Okay, Joe Canis, I see you in the middle.
All right, great. Thanks. For the record, Joseph Canis. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, principal engineer with Ty and Bond. We did the third-party review of the application. My review was based on both the application documents and my site visit on January 28th. The applicant, as you know, is proposing a network of new storm drains and underground chambers, but is using the existing outfalls, which is a preferred approach. The site is also topographically lower than the surrounding properties. So run-on from the adjacent properties is more of a concern than the runoff from the site. The runoff of the site won't affect the adjacent properties because they are higher in elevation. So I issued my first letter on January 29th, which again was concentrated on stormwater management and sediment erosion controls. And as Mr. Flaherty said, those comments were more of a technical nature, comments about hydraulic capacities, confirmation of assumptions that were made in the design, as well as a clarification of the design details, just looking for some additional information to get assurances that what was proposed would work. And so our basic findings are that the applicant's engineer took a very conservative approach to the design, and obviously from a drainage standpoint, that's a good thing. That's what you want to do. The design also exceeds the minimum requirements of the town. For example, the applicant did use a fresh meadow approach, even though they weren't required to because there already are detention facilities on the site. And they're also, the applicant's engineer also used the NOAA 14 precipitation depths for the drainage calculations, which is a recommended approach, but it is not required by the town. So they used more conservative rainfall values. So, and the other thing that the applicant did was they are not taking credit for runoff reduction through infiltration. So even though they are infiltrating, they didn't take credit for that in their computations. So the applicant looked at flows in 2 different directions towards Ledge Road and Cummings Brook and demonstrated that for both of those directions that there would be no adverse flooding effects as a result of the project. And the other improvement from a stormwater management perspective is that there is a 3,400 square foot reduction in impervious cover from moving the buildings around and shifting curb lines. So we did have some comments back on January 28th to which the applicant responded and they addressed our concerns. So I issued a revised letter dated February 22nd with the disposition of the comments, and all of them have been addressed to our satisfaction. So we're comfortable with what's being proposed. So if the commission has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
That's great. I appreciate that, Joe. No, you're thorough as always, and I like to see there's a reduction in impervious coverage, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yes. Does any commissioner have any questions for Joe Canis? We can do turn your light on or raise your hand. Great. If you don't mind, Michael Galante, can I ask you another question? Yeah, you're muted.
Of course.
See, I wrote down the note I wanted to ask you earlier, but I forgot. You said that there's going to be no change in peak hours. What are the peak hours?
No, I didn't say any change to peak hours. I said there was very little change in site traffic during the peak hours.
Right, right. Which are but my question was, what are the peak hours? I wasn't sure.
Generally speaking, it's likely for a dealership is probably for drop off at 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, and the pickup is probably 5 to 6 or 4 to 5 at night. I'd have to go back to the report, see if they actually identified the very specific peak hours. Because don't forget, they didn't do actual traffic counts. They did a review of activity as far as customers and sales and so on.
Okay, that's fine.
But I'll double check while we're talking.
That'd be great. Thank you. Because I know, like, we did another application, the peak hours were like 12 noon. This is a different use, so obviously the peak hours are different. And
Absolutely. Yep.
I want to make sure that there's no kind of, conflicting peak hours and whatnot. But you said there's no real change anyway, so that's okay.
Yeah, keep in mind the peak hour of Ledge Road might be somewhat different than the peak hour of the dealership. With Whole Foods next door, that has a peak that's generating its own traffic during peak hours. That probably doesn't coincide with the dealership peak hours. For example, in the morning, the dealership customers arriving in the store next to it's probably lightly used at that point in time in the morning. Saturday afternoon, Whole Foods is busy, and the dealership may be busy with sales if it's that time of year where people are buying cars.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that, to make sure those 2 peak hours were not on top of each other.
Right. It says in the report that
How do
8
we
to
know what
9 a.m. is
the
based
hours
on DOT data. That's in the Kimley Horn report, page 4.
Okay.
8 to 9 peak in the morning, peak afternoon, 5 to 6 p.m.
All
That's
right, so I was close. That's pretty standard for peak hour, really, of the road, and to somewhat of, what's driving this is not the peak hour of the dealership itself, but the peak hour of the road traffic on the road, such as Ledge Road.
Okay, great, thank you. Kara, would you ask any question? I heard you.
No, Jeremy just answered it. I wanted to know what the actual peak hours were and if they coincided with either Whole Foods or Ledge Road.
Great, okay, great, thank you. Wilder Gleason, where'd you go? Where's Wilder? There he is. Wilder's off screen. So I think is that the end of your presentation, Wilder?
Sorry, Can
We
I
are
ask-
done.
Yes, you can. Go ahead, Kara.
so an actual traffic count wasn't done and they did it based on, I would hope, service records, not just sales records.
If I can answer that, it was not just sales records, because obviously sales are not busy at all in the morning, but it's service calls, appointments, and sales in the afternoon and on weekends, certainly. It's just the entire operation.
And they're anticipating though that they would increase.
I'm sure they're hoping it will increase, yes.
Right. Okay, I just want to make sure that we were all under the same assumption that they're doing this because, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Hey, John Canning, I see that you're here. Do you have anything to add to this discussion at all? Or are you good?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. First of all, there will be no meaningful increase in traffic. Basically, while Mini service is coming over, the pre-owned sales are going to the Mini, and they more or less offset each other. Mr. Galante correctly noted, as indicated in Table 2 of our report, that the number of additional trips associated with the Mini activity is, I think it's 18. He said 17. I'll give him a break on that. But the offset from removing the pre-owned sales to the dealership at Mini is 17, so it's a wash. We do expect an increase of, I think it was 4 trips in the peak hour, based on the fact that there's one additional bay, but it's nominal. We also did actually count on March 16th, which was pretty much the day before everything shut down, and we compared the data that we counted to the DOT data, and it was obviously less. We did find that on that day, the peak hour of Ledge Road was, let me just open it up here on my screen. The peak hour on Ledge Road was from 8:30 to 9:30, and actually the peak hour at the dealership was from 9 to 10 that morning. But, you know, volumes were down. It was at the start of the pandemic, so we feel that it's not really meaningful, and we went with the DOT data.
Thank you. Oops, thank you. Okay,
Thank
good. That I think ends, you're all done with your peer review, guys, right? Wilder, you're all set, right?
We're done. We're waiting to hear from the neighbors.
Okay. Does any other commissioner have any questions of either the applicant or any of their peer reviewers? Sounds like no. Okay. So with that said, we can open up it to the general public to see if anybody has any comments on the application. If you have any comments, raise your hand and you will be recognized.
Jackie Kaufman, maybe?
Jackie Kaufman. Jackie Kaufman, I heard she was going to be here.
She's here. There she is.
But she
Hey,
didn't.
I'm here.
Others?
I was unable to modify my, raise my hand. I don't know if I missed, I couldn't find it fast enough.
No, this is what, raise your hand is this.
Oh,
It's in
this
my-
works, the old fashioned hand. Thank you. I would love the opportunity to speak tonight, but also I defer to others first. I know that there are members of the community here who may wish to speak first, and then I'll be happy to speak when they're finished.
Fantastic. Anybody from the community want to come speak to this application? Please raise your hand
Turn on your
and
camera.
turn on your microphone.
We did have, I will say, we did get comments for the record, written comments for the record, from Charles McCahey. I believe Mr. McCahey is here. We did get his email earlier today, and the commission members received it as well. We've received other emails in the past on this application from Glenn Rich, dated March 2nd. Commission has that email. And Peter Milhoupolis. Sorry for mispronouncing, Peter. We got your email today or yesterday as well, dated March 1st. So those are the emails that are in the record that the commission members also have received.
Fantastic. Okay. Looks like no one else wants.
Mrs. Dean.
Yes, wait.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Mrs. Dean.
Yes, good evening. My name is Donna Dean, and I live at 46 Hale Lane, which is in Middlesex Commons. My unit is at the back of the property and therefore adjacent to where BMW is planning to add the large new service building with a rooftop parking. Unfortunately, if this project goes forward, I will be quite directly impacted by the parking lot view, the noise, and the pollution that it will create on my front doorstep. I should point out that this will be in addition to the negative effects I'm already dealing with from the Whole Foods project, which dug out a beautiful wooded berm that was behind my home to create a parking lot, leaving me with an unobstructed view of I-95 and significantly higher level of traffic noise than I experienced before the Whole Foods project. So what I'm asking for from planning and zoning is a better recognition of Middlesex Commons as a residential community. It's clear that our residents will be negatively impacted by the BMW project as planned, and that our property values will decline if it goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dean. Appreciate that. Would anybody else like to speak to this application? Is anybody else? No? Jackie Kaufman, you just raised your hand and your microphone is on. Miss Kaufman? Is it Miss
Thank you
Kaufman?
very much. Good
Welcome.
evening, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Jackie Kaufman. I'm an attorney with Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy, here representing Middlesex Condo community, which is located to the north of the BMW dealership. I've had the opportunity to speak with staff, to speak with the applicant, and to speak before the ARB in the past, and this is our first opportunity to speak with you this evening. We understand that the meeting will continue to be held open to receive comments from the ARB, to which we also have some follow-up comments to make. While the applicant has reached out, and we have spent now almost a year, interrupted of course, but we have spent time speaking, and my client remains in objection to the rooftop parking proposed on the service building. And I would like to take the moment now to go through the special permit requirements and procedures with you and your regulations that are relevant to those objections. I will state, though, for the record, that the applicant has been available to the members of the condominiums. They've taken a site walk together, and certainly the landscaping and some of the treatment of the rear of the building has improved considerably. And for that, the neighborhood is, the condominium complex is very appreciative. It is moving in the right direction. It is just not completely there yet in a manner that permits the condominiums to provide its support. Number one, it would help me if we, as we speak to this, is it possible to have the site plan up, please, on the screen?
That's a Craig Flaherty question. Craig, you still here?
Craig, would
I'm
you,
here.
if
Yeah,
you
I
have
do.
easy access to the plan and can share that, I think that would be helpful to me.
Yeah, if we were in a real hearing, the site plan would be up on an easel right now.
I would walk right up
Okay.
to it. I would take my pointer and laser around the sections that were of interest. The
There you go.
objections, as I stated, are all relative to the service building in the rear. Certainly, we have a pre-existing use. If we can zone in, please, on the service building, that would be helpful. We've spent a lot of time talking about this plan, and as you may recall, if you've recently visited the site, the service building, which is in roughly the same location and is a third of the size. So first and foremost, what the condominium has grappled with was the expansion of the size of this building. Certainly, if you're not classifying it as an expansion, we are looking at an an intensification, a large intensification of the service use here. And the service use is a noxious use. We're in an SB zone. It's permitted here, certainly, but this use not only is getting larger and it's coming closer to a residential use. And your special permit criteria are clear under section 1000 that the location and size of the use, the nature and intensity of the operations involved in connection with it, the location of the site with respect to what's around it must be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the district in which it is located. And our SB zones in town certainly are in appropriate locations along the highway, but in this instance, they border on a zone which permits residential use, and here a very intense residential use, not to mention one which is at a higher elevation. So the experience of this now intensified and expanded service building has a direct impact on the condominiums. We're looking at what I'd like to call 2 columns, 2 buckets, if you will, of objection. And one has to do with the operations of the service building, and many of those, just the physical plant of the building and what's coming from it, the applicants have been sensitive to mitigating over the last several months. However, on the parking deck, the parking garage, the rooftop parking, which is not only a new use to this site, but is really a very new use to the Darien community. You accepted this use as a use via a text change in, it was last January, and it was in connection with this application. The applicants came to you to request this use to be located here. And I believe it's only, you have rooftop parking in only one other location in town. And I hope I'm not wrong with that statistic. But this is certainly the first parking garage and parking deck, rooftop parking, that has been associated with an industrial use in town. And with that, unlike just having residential rooftop parking, people are maybe leaving and coming and going in the morning, or where it is completely embedded by other retail or commercial uses. Here we now, because of the elevation change, have taken a parking lot that was much lower and raised it higher and closer to the neighbors. The landscaping that has been proposed and has evolved is a good visual mitigation, but beyond as well as some of the mansard roof detailing. And however, there are still other senses that will be impacted and offended by this use, and those continue to be visual from some of the condos which are located right adjacent to it, which have, are 2 and 3 stories high and can see right down over into onto the use, but also the sight, smell, sound, and just the experience of really the noise. And I know we've heard from our acoustical expert, and he's provided some mitigation that has said the use will produce less noise, or the mitigation techniques that are being employed will ultimately produce less noise than what's experienced today. And it's hard for the community to be able to completely accept that report, because the use is now 3 times larger than it was. It is being, and some of the sound may be enclosed, but also at the end of the acoustical report, there are 3 conditions that are recommended to be included as conditions of approval, which we'll speak to. But the fact that there are additional measures that need to be taken beg the question as to what type of noise will be produced, not only throughout the day from the building, but one thing that is not clear is what type of noise will be produced associated with the cars. And this is important because what we've heard and what the community has heard over the last year repeatedly from the applicant, and what we have heard, what I've heard and you have heard in the testimony that you received last week, is that the rooftop parking will be primarily used by employees of BMW, except for when it's not. And in my private discussions with applicants' counsel, I have asked for more detail to that. I have asked for suggested conditions that could potentially mitigate any of that impact that may bring comfort or some level of expectation to what this use will be and what impacts it will have, what this intensification, how it will impact the community. And we can't get a gauge on that. That has not been provided to you. It has not really been provided in any of the reports that you've received. And I don't really think that it has been critically unpacked. And I think that it should be further explored. I think the applicant should be required to provide more information about what this means for employees. Will they be driving their own private vehicles in and parking there at 7 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 7 o'clock in the evening? Or will they be parking some of them off-site and bringing in vehicles that are being serviced that day? Certainly that service vehicle would be parked by an employee. I heard you just speaking a little earlier tonight about where the cutoff point is. I'm not worried. I don't think anyone is worried about customers coming up and down this ramp, but certainly how the business plans to use this and what is meant by employee parking is important. And the applicant is hesitant to, I shouldn't even say hesitant, they will not commit to any type of condition in conversation with the condominiums that would limit or restrict the way they use their property. And quite frankly, I think that is the completely, it's an inconsistent position given the lengths and expense and sensitivity that they've gone to landscape around this. And they were hoping, I think, that the visual mitigation of this thrice expanded service building would be enough. And certainly on paper, it's very impressive, but we have not discussed the operations. And we've been more than forthcoming about what we would need and what the community would potentially need to get to that point. And that certainly has not been provided. So when we further look through your standards of approval, I think it only goes to why this point is also very critical to your consideration of this request. Location, nature, size, and height of buildings, walls, fences, nature and extent of landscaping, screening, lighting, signs that will not hinder or discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent land and buildings or impair the value thereof. It is a critical part of your consideration to take into account how this community will be affected, and it will be extremely affected. I think the condominiums owners have been very open and willing to engage in mitigating techniques. They understand that this is an SB zone and there's an existing industrial use that has the right to continue to operate and advance with the times. But there also is a compromise that needs to occur between these uses, and we look to you as the arbiter of your regulations to require that these two zones and that these two uses are appropriate neighbors in the way that they're managed and continue to grow. Just reading back through these, I think they have met G, wherever possible and reasonable, consideration shall be given to protection, preservation, and enhancement of natural environments. And certainly attaching conditions and safeguards is a part of your responsibility and is permitted to protect public health, safety, and general welfare to ensure the continued compliance with the regulations. So considering conditions, be them operational or not, I think is going to be an important part of this discussion before the hearing is closed, and whether that continues to happen privately between the condominiums and the condominium and the applicant, or here tonight. We'll see. We always remain open to continuing to work with the applicant to get this to go in the direction that we think it's the appropriate direction. Another standard for approval, including the two that I just mentioned, are the review of the site plan. And with that, I'd like to speak to a few things that I have mentioned both to the applicant before and to the ARB. Again, we've made some great advancements. There are three portions of the building that we think require additional sensitivity and consideration by the commission. Number one, it's the solar panels. Solar panels are terrific. I'd love to see them used in projects. I'm happy that they're being used here. However, the solar panels will be, if you look through some of your elevations, will be located at a pitch that will exceed the height of the mansard roof. So there are visual mitigation efforts that have been made that help the condos tremendously. And then we have, if the solar panels are standing straight up, which they may do to collect the sun, will not be hidden from view. The applicant thought that that was an unreasonable request, but again, we're looking down at a service building and at a parking garage, and there have been great efforts made, and I think that that roof line should be modified or enhanced, or there should be a level of pitch to the solar panels that would not exceed it. In my discussion with Mr. Flaherty, he said that they may be flat in many instances. That may also be, but I can't be sure when they'll be up. We have not discussed that either, but that also is a visual impairment to the neighbors for consideration. On the rear wall, and we've spent a considerable amount of time on how the lighting will be used, affected, and properly managed. We believe that there should be a condition on the lighting that and that even the security lighting is at a certain level. Everything can be dimmed, and we'd like to see this as a condition that can be enforced if and when the lighting is not turned off in a way that has been consistently, or that has been represented during these public hearings. There is a wall pack, and the lighting, I should say, has also been modified based on some of our comments, but there is a wall pack that remains on the rear of the building to the left of this. It's hard to see from this particular spot, but the landscape architect did speak to it last time, and it will be at a certain elevation. I believe it's at about 8 feet in height, but where it's located will still directly shine out and toward the condominiums. We don't think that it's appropriately screened, will provide a negative impact. It is the one light that we do not seem to come to any agreement on, and I ask that you give that some serious consideration, because it will have a detrimental effect and be, I think, in contravention to the standards of your approval. Again, given the lengths that we've gone to, or the applicant has gone to mitigate some of the issues on the rear side of the building for the condominiums, we think that this is a place that we can also achieve some compromise on. There with also regard to the sound, the rooftop mechanicals have been relocated from the ground in this case to right now they're existing on the ground, and they've been relocated to the roof. So I would like to hear more from the acoustical engineer as to how the relocation of those units from the ground to the roof will not produce more sound that immediately impacts the neighbors. Again, reminding you that everything that was once on the ground and further away is now being raised up and inserted almost at level into their backyard. Finally, I'd like to speak to the corner of to the corner of the parking ramp. Do you mind zooming in for me, Craig, on the section that we most recently discussed? Yes. We have some concern here that the parking ramp may be a structure and that it may be partially located within the SEP. I won't take too much time discussing this. I did raise this privately to Mr. Flaherty and to Mr. Gleason, and it was their interpretation that the parking deck ramp, which in my opinion is integral to the service building and the structure should meet the setbacks. However, in that small triangular area, do you mind just circling that there for me, Craig, just so everyone sees the section I'm speaking about? Thank you so much. This is the area where the portion of the ramp structure begins to ascend to the rooftop parking. The plan here notes that there's a concrete parapet on top of the wall, and the parapet's typically a component of the building, but here it's being interpreted as a retaining wall, and these usually used for screening. So your regulations define structure as anything constructed, installed, placed, or erected, which requires location on the ground or attachment to something having location on the ground. And there's a list of structures, and including but not limited to handicapped ramps, and certainly garage ramps have not been included in here, but I don't think that that is expressed. I think that it is because this is a fairly new structure to Darien. And so I spoke to Craig about this. It was his interpretation. It was a retaining wall and not a structure. I asked that you look at that as well. And speaking with Mr. Ginsburg and Mr. Keating, who looked at it and got back to me late today, he agrees with that interpretation. However, the building inspector disagrees with that interpretation and says that a ramp which provides access to a rooftop for vehicular parking which is called a parking garage or a parking structure, would indeed be considered part of the structure. So it seems that maybe there is a difference in opinion. I know sometimes building and zoning codes are not always aligned, but as you are the ultimate arbiter of your regulations, I ask that you take a closer look to this. We'll provide something to Mr. Keating, or have provided something to Mr. Keating that you can look at between now and your next public hearing in more detail. So as it stands today, we do not believe that the structure, portions of the structure, and the rooftop parking use that is proposed can meet the standards of approval under section 1005. And ask for your further consideration of those, perhaps either in the remainder of this hearing, we will learn more, and or between now and the next public hearing as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I have a few members of the board who are on with us as well. I encourage you to read their letters. I'm speaking to you strictly from a regulatory and land use law position, and theirs are certainly maybe even much more compelling as neighbors who have to live with this use day after day. And I ask that you, just because we discussed very briefly back a year ago that structured parking might be appropriate here, and you asked for all of their comments to be held until now, that you take those comments into consideration. I know there's several people there who have strong feelings about this. You've heard from 4 of them individually. I speak on behalf of the board, and you may continue to hear more from those neighbors in the days ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Appreciate your comments. I was trying to take notes on your list of items, and I missed number 2. Number 1 was the employee rooftop parking, but I missed what you
my.
called number 2.
I don't know if I can think back to that.
And then 3 was
Employee
solar.
parking. I'm happy to reduce all these to writing for you as well. I think we talked about employee parking, but was the
That was the
comment
first
that's come from the applicant is that it will be used for employee parking.
Yeah, I got
Will
that.
not accept that condition, but they've said that it will be used for other things. Maybe that's service vehicles, maybe that's, I don't know what that is. And it's very hard, I think, to meet to demonstrate that you can meet the standards of the special permit regulations when you refuse to define the use for which you want. If there is no parameter that's put around that, no condition to that, or even no verbal commitment during the public hearing as to exactly how that means, in a year from now or 5 years from now, when that starts to be used for inventory or circulation. And I do believe that the applicant has every best intention to do the right thing, but management changes, people change, conditions change, needs change. And that's why the applicant wants maximum flexibility so that they can keep using it in a manner that is conducive to their business need. But that's not congruous with, I think, what you're tasked with. And it is hard then to get a commitment or know how it will ultimately impact your land. Again, moving the parking up and closer to the backyards of this neighborhood. And certainly, we don't think that's an appropriate development of a land adjacent to residential property.
But wasn't number 2 the change of rooftop parking, industrial use rooftop parking as opposed to commercial or residential rooftop parking, I think?
Oh,
Yeah.
certainly. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So that we have right now, the rooftop parking is demonstrated to be for employees, and that we've seen it otherwise exercised in town as in other capacities that may not be on a sensitive border like this. And then we also spoke to site planning and design elements of the building.
Okay.
To some of the acoustical to the conclusions of the acoustical report.
Okay. One thing that you have to make sure you recognize is we don't have any industrial zones in Darien. This is a retail use. It's not an industrial use.
This building service. I apologize.
You kept saying it's an industrial use. It's not industrial use. With regards, we're going to jump around a little bit. With regards to the ramp,
Yes.
Jeremy is versed in this, and the zoning enforcement worked on it today. You want to comment on that?
Sure. In response to Ms. Kaufman's question regarding the corner of the ramp to get up to, I'll call it the roof of the service bay building, zoning enforcement officer David Keating looked at that issue today. He spent some time reviewing that question, looking through the regulations, analyzing the situation, understanding Ms. Kaufman's question. And Dave's summary is that in the case of the proposed elevated driveway proposed on Phil, it is not a part of the building, so it does not need to comply with the setback requirements of a building. As you know, part of this application is under section 850 of the Darien zoning regulations, land filling and regrading, and they will be placing fill next to the building to create a ramp to go up to the roof of the building. And so Davis said basically the ramp is proposed to be on top of the fill, and his interpretation is the driveway is on the fill area with an adjacent retaining wall. So his interpretation was that the ramp up to the roof was not part of the building, but rather created based on proposed fill, which is part of this application.
Which makes sense. The building can exist without the ramp.
But you
The
can't
building,
stop
the
without the ramp.
building can exist without the ramp, but the rooftop parking cannot exist without the ramp. So the
Okay.
rooftop parking, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We think it's an integral part of the building for the purpose of achieving rooftop parking. You have to access the rooftop parking, wouldn't be possible without it. And so the rooftop parking is like a parking garage. You have a series of ramps that need to access it. And typically in building codes, national building codes, ramps are considered to be something that is part of the structure. So regardless of the substrate under the finished concrete ramp, it's concrete, mind you, which is stated as soil. And it feels a bit, it's an interesting way to kind of get around this potential issue. We think it's a structure because there's soil under a building, there's soil under potentially under a handicapped ramp, but
Yep.
those things are still considered structures. If a handicapped ramp is structured, the way Dave described it to me is that a handicapped ramp isn't necessarily, it doesn't have fill underneath it, but in this case, the fill is being placed here to achieve the perceived compliance, I think, with the regulation. But the need for a wall and a 4-foot high concrete screen is really just a configuration that they've designed. This ramp and the service building are really one unified structure, and the ramp portions would be required to be in the setbacks. So if you agree with this analysis, we think that it could be concluded that this portion of the service building requires a variance from the ZBA, or the applicant should reduce the size of the service building to conform with the zoning regulations and the setbacks, requiring a redesign. But again, that is not for me to decide. That's my humble interpretation, and in our conference with the building department as well. And certainly you're the arbiter of your regulations, but I would like to make my communication to Mr. Keating and his communication back to me part of the record.
I appreciate that.
Not a problem, not a problem. With regard to the rooftop parking, right? The applicant basically stated it's going to be for employee parking, which to me seems non-intensive. Do you have any idea in your mind what you would like to see on the rooftop parking? I don't think it's going to be for cars going in and out every single day or all hours of the day. But if it was storage, that's even less intense. So I can't be more intense. That's why I don't know why you want to put brackets around it and what they can use for it. I don't get the answer. I don't get the reason for that.
I would have to confer with my client, but I'd say if there was a condition that said it shall be used only for employee parking, that may be sufficient. However, that's not a condition that I understand the applicant is willing to take. They've stated it will be used primarily for employee parking, except for when we need it for inventory or service vehicles, and they won't put parameters around. I'm just going to guess. Let's just say if they say 75% employee parking, 25% miscellaneous.
I get that, but if it was used for dead inventory, that's even a less intensive. You should be happy about that. That's the part that's the disconnect. If it's used for inventory, cars just sit there, that'll move.
I think that when we have a series of unknowns and having represented several businesses, there are things, if you can't make a commitment to it at a public hearing and live with it long term, then there are a potential parade of horribles. I think that we've all seen that. And that's why your special permit criteria give you the ability to condition your approvals so that uses that are incongruous, like a condominium complex and a service building that share a border, can find ways to live harmoniously. I think it may be very challenging for your staff potentially to enforce that, but there are people and they will be watching, and there are windows that look down on this and will be impacted by it. So we ask that you take that into serious consideration as a commission.
If it's used for inventory, that's a less intense use, and I don't know why you'd be against that. So that's just.
I'm not stating that I'm for or against anything. I'm stating that
I heard exactly what you said. I heard exactly what you said.
We'll make a commitment. That's what gives condominiums distrust and pause.
I got it.
Thank you.
With regard to the intensity of use, you heard the applicant, we're adding one additional bay to the complex. And there's gonna be, no material addition in traffic to the property. So in your statement say it's a new, more intense use. I don't understand how you got there.
They said it themselves.
Excuse me? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
It was a question to you, Ms. Attorney Kaufman. With regards to, they're adding one additional bay to the project, to the complex. So I'm trying to figure out how you say it's going to be a larger intense use if they're only adding one bay at the end of the day.
Well, number one, the structure itself is tripling in size, and you are now adding a rooftop component use to it. So when I talk about the intensity of the use, I'm not simply referring to the amount of business that will be performed inside. We know that it will be more, and also to the size of the structure, the number of employees inside, and the fact that you're putting a use on the roof where there previously was not one.
So you're laser focused on one aspect of the site plan, even though the impervious coverage is going down.
I have Mr. Rich and Mr. Regan here, and what I'd like to do is just to ask them a question to confirm something for the record. That we are not confirm for me, please. We are not objecting to the continuation of the service building or the use of service on the side. It's the manner in which it's been proposed, and specifically the addition of the rooftop parking, and also the noise that's been generated by it. I have mentioned that the mitigating techniques have been well received, but there are still outstanding issues.
Okay, and we had a acoustic study from an acoustical engineer that said the sound is not going to go up. Okay. What else? The solar panels. With regards to solar, you don't like solar panels, or you think they're too tall, or that part I missed you on that. Because this size of the parapet wall is 10 feet high. It's 6 on top of 4.
I believe so.
Right? So
Do
you think the solar panels are going to be taller than 10 feet?
The applicant's counsel confirmed to me that if they were fully erected, they would be.
And they're supposed to be on an angle.
If they're at a certain angle, they would be hidden by the mansard roof in the back. If they're straight up, they'll be seen.
So if I'm standing in the circle of Middlesex Commons and looking straight across through all the bushes, you're telling me I can see a solar panel sticking up above a 10-foot wall? That's the
When
belief?
we looked at the elevations, it appeared that could be the case.
Okay, but the walls, the parapet, the height of the wall is 10 feet. And the only spot you can see is if
I didn't design the plans, so I.
Oh, I studied the plans.
Can ask to me, I did Mr. Gleason last week, and so there's nothing we could do about the solar panels, which is fine. I'm just raising it to you because these are all things that people next door are looking at. We are expanding the size of the building, expanding what's on top, and this is a new use, and I think it all needs to be considered. If we can go back to the acoustical report for a moment, because you'd asked me about that.
Sure.
The sound engineer at the conclusion of his reports recommends 3 conditions. I raise these to Mr. Gleason as additional conditions that should be considered to be included in your report, because the mechanicals have been relocated from the ground to the roof of the expanded building. And he recognizes that there are still things outstanding that need mitigation. So while you, I think, are making the conclusion, Mr. Mulvaney, that we have a report that says no impact or less sound, there are things that he still identified as potentially harmful to my clients. So he says the proposed roof edge wall must rise to an elevation of 78 feet as currently proposed. It can't be any lower, because if it is, it will probably have a negative impact. those last words were mine, not his. The proposed roof edge wall must be continuous and solid. The proposed insulated steel stud mansard roof walls suits this purpose. So again, these are not compromisable, or can't be compromised, I should say. Compromisable, I'm sorry, that bad word. 3, use of the car dryer cycle is not recommended before 7 a.m. and after 10 p.m. If new equipment is installed at the new location, lower noise blowers should be given preference. So this begs the question, if there are lower noise blowers out there, should they not be employed? I think it looks like they're continuing to use maybe old equipment that produces quite a bit of noise. And it is not clear to me that this will or will not represent a decrease in noise. It sounds like it will be maybe a maintenance of noise. I don't know if it will be more or less, but there are certainly time limitations here that are placed on it. But it says 7 a.m. or after 10 p.m. Now, I was under the impression that the service building was to be closed each evening at 7 p.m. So I would prefer that condition to be consistent with the operating hours of the facility. Otherwise, it may be concluded that there would be activity happening between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. And certainly it seems like this is very noisy equipment. And that should also be looked at more carefully.
Yeah, no, we talked about the hours. Mr. Gleason in his application was misconstrued relative to us. Understood. Okay, that's fine. Kara Gately, did you have any questions? You were coming in. I just want to make sure.
I did. I wanted to get clarification because I think Attorney Kaufman's point on the ramp and the disparity or the sort of perhaps perceived conflict or different interpretations of perhaps the building department and the zoning department on whether something is part of a structure or not part of a structure. And I think the example that she raised of handicap ramps is particularly, compelling. And I don't really know if I sort of understand how fill under something makes something part of a structure, because we can put fill under a generator and it still has to abide by setbacks, right? And we can put fill under all sorts of things and they still have to abide by the setbacks. So Jeremy, I would be interested in you or Fred kind of clarifying, and I definitely am in favor of the correspondence between Attorney Kaufman and David Keating on this point being made part of the record, because I certainly would like to understand it better. And I think it's an important issue that needs to be clarified and considered. So if you guys could, speak to it a little bit, I would appreciate that.
You want to speak to it now again, a second time, or you want to have, I've never seen David Keating's memo.
No.
Neither
So,
have I. I think Jeremy and Fred often speak to issues like that, and they have even tonight. So I think, and they have in many applications, right? Just like Attorney Gleason mentioned that he withdrew certain things because of his conversations with Mr. Ginsburg and Mr. Ginsburg's, opinion that certain parts of the regulations had never been used before, so that could be withdrawn. So I think Jeremy can certainly speak to this.
Right, I get it, Carrie. He spoke about it 5 minutes ago, and then there's a memo or an email. Right. But go ahead,
I haven't seen it. And if he could just speak more closely on it, I would appreciate that. I don't know why you have a problem with it, Steve.
I don't have a care. I'm just let him talk.
The question
I just asked him to talk.
The question came to Mr. Keating earlier today, and he worked on a memo today to me. That memo is dated March 2nd, 2021. I can read it into the record if you want, and then give you a hard copy of it after the hearing tonight. But
if you have a view on it that was different than his, I'd like to hear your view.
Oh no, my view is the same as Dave Keating's. I read his memo. We did discuss it briefly about the design of the driveway ramp, the paved driveway and all that. And so it was something we discussed together. And then he wrote the memo, and we were in agreement on the memo, on his interpretation.
We'll put the memo in the file.
But a handicap ramp would be treated differently. This is considered a driveway?
This is considered, what Dave said, and I'll read it. I'll just read it, and that way.
I'm so confused.
Okay. It's a memo from Dave Keating to Jeremy Ginsburg dated March 2nd, 2021. You would ask me to look into the question of whether the access driveway ramp to the rooftop parking above the proposed service building must comply with the setback requirements as part of the building. The design of the driveway ramp is to fill the area adjacent to the right side and rear walls of the proposed building and to install retaining walls to contain the fill. The paved driveway would be placed on top of the fill and would provide the ramp from the first floor level to the rooftop level. The inclined driveway would not be supported up in the air, it would be on fill. The retaining wall and fill along the back wall of the proposed service building would be as much as 13 feet above the exterior grade of the retaining wall. The driveway ramp is proposed to be 12 feet wide, and the retaining wall is proposed to be approximately 1 foot wide. The retaining wall in that area would be more than 20 feet from the rear property line, from the rear lot line rather. Thus, even if that portion of the driveway ramp is considered a structure or part of the building, it would comply with the minimum 20-foot setback requirement of the SB zone. On the right side of the proposed service building, the driveway starts at existing ground level and rises about 4 feet. Since the driveway extends 25 feet out from the side wall of the building, a wedge or a triangular portion of the driveway would be less than 20 feet from the rear lot line in that vicinity. The paved driveway would be placed on top of the fill and would be the lowest part or start of the ramp from the ground level to the rooftop level. The driveway would be on an inclined portion of fill. It would not be a structure supported above the ground. If you recall, several years ago, as a result of a house construction that included considerable filling to raise the ground level to create a patio close to the level of the first floor of the house, the Commission amended the definition of building coverage to include such future patios that are more than 4 feet above the adjacent ground level to be counted as part of the building coverage calculations. The Commission chose not to define the patio elevated by fill as a building or structure. In the case of the proposed elevated driveway proposed on fill, it is not a part of the building, so it does not need to comply with the setback requirements of a building. Whether it is more than 4 feet high is not the question. The fact is that it is an inclined driveway proposed to be installed on fill. The Commission will make the decision about the appropriateness and acceptability of the extent and location of the proposed regrading to facilitate the proposed driveway. For safety, the exterior of the inclined driveway should have a strong elevated curb and guardrail system to prevent any vehicles from falling off. In this case, the design has evolved to include a solid 4-foot-high wall that will provide safety for the drivers of vehicles using the driveway, and it will minimize the visibility by neighbors of the driveway surface and the lower portions of vehicles using the driveway. Even though this proposed safety and screening wall is referred to on the drawings as a parapet wall, it does not change my conclusion that the driveway as designed is not a building or structure that must comply with the setback requirements. That's the memo verbatim.
Right, but it's still 10 feet, it's still 20 feet from the setback anyway.
The building is 20 feet from the setback.
Even the driveway ramp is 20 feet 2 inches.
I think what they're talking about.
And this driveway on fill is 20 feet?
20 feet 2 inches.
I can clarify the plan view if you'd like me to.
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Craig.
So first, at the left side of the screen, you will see the 20-foot rear yard setback. That's the principal structure setback for the SB zone. This is the dashed line that represents that setback. So that setback is clear of the driveway and wall and ramp in this section. So even if you were to consider this a structure, which David Keating and Jeremy Ginsburg say is not for your zoning regulations, but even if you were to say that, it is conforming with the principal structure setback for the zone.
Right.
The question that's being raised is on this edge. So on this edge, you see that zoning setback turning and the dashed line. So this setback is now the 20-foot setback from the Whole Foods property line, not the setback from the Middlesex Condos property line. This section, it has really no wall on its eastern side. This double line under the highlight is a 6-inch curb, like any other 6-inch curb you would see on the edge of a road or the edge of a driveway or the edge of a parking lot. This section is a 6-inch curb. So this sloped section of driveway is simply a sloped section of driveway with a 6-inch curb on its edge. It happens to be covered with concrete. It could as simply be covered with asphalt. So perhaps there's a question of this little spot right here, where the retaining wall and parapet wall come down, where they're compliant with the setback. And here, again, they do not need to be compliant with the setback, but it is a location where we're at that 4-foot, at this point, really, it's a freestanding wall. So the ground elevation on this side, on the driveway side, is exactly the same as the ground elevation on the north side. So this is basically a 4-foot freestanding wall. Again, put there to reduce headlight impact, sound impact, and for the neighbors. But it's a freestanding wall, ground elevation the same here as it is there. So we could actually just put a curb here, but then we wouldn't have that 4-foot wall to help screen. So really, I think the argument becomes moot, whether you take one side of it or not, if we reduce this bit of wall back to the setback line by about 2 feet.
Thank you, Craig. I knew the back part wasn't in the setback. And the other setback line is on the Whole Food side. Okay, that's fine.
Right, could you go back to that again? Because I'd like to address something else in it. If you could pull that up for a sec, would that be all right?
Sure, Riley, go ahead.
So let's focus on the service lot in the back and realize that we have driveway surrounding this building on all 4 sides. And the driveway touches the building virtually every place on the perimeter. If there's 10% that doesn't touch the driveway, it's just the area in front of the parts department, right down here. So is the driveway that is around 3/4 of this building and asphalt a structure that needs to meet setbacks? Well, the regulations are really clear. You can have a driveway up to your property line. And so then the question is this elevated ramp or driveway required to meet setbacks? And I would submit that it's not, and we have some information to provide you, but I wanted to see Jackie's memo and Dave Keating's response before we sort of responded to it. But you've got driveway all the way around this building. And the structure that we're talking about has a retaining wall that meets setbacks, and there is no retaining wall on the east side next to Whole Foods. And then the question is, because we happen to have a driveway, let's change it from concrete to asphalt. Is that part of the building now? And what has happened is Jackie is conflating building code with zoning code. And that fact that Peter Solheim assumed we had retaining walls meant that he needed to issue a building permit, possibly. But the design here isn't going to require it on the area that Jackie is raising as a concern. And it's your zoning regulations that control, not Peter Solheim's interpretation of building code. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. Would anybody else like to speak to this application?
Mr. Reagan.
Jack Regan, you raised your hand. Please turn on your microphone and you're recognized. And then
Yes, I did. I'm Jack Regan. I live on Hale Lane, a member of the board of the Middlesex Commons Condominium Association. I've appeared before you on 2 prior occasions, some time ago, pre-COVID days. I'm going to try to confine my remarks to the rooftop parking situation. What are we really dealing with here? I want to look at the big picture, not which corner of the property is here or there or whatever. We have a massive building facing us. It's not an industrial use, but it certainly appears to be of industrial size. There is a 182-foot long wall on our side where we have the adjoining property line. We will be looking at, from the second stories of many of the condominiums, 37 cars in 2 rows coming and going all day, because it is hard for me with Mr. Gleason and the other representatives not admitting to the fact that we believe that the use of that parking area will be for the cars that are being serviced, and they will be going up and down all day. As to what we would like to see up there, what Jackie asked me to comment on before, I'd like to see new inventory up there. If you ever permit the use of the roof as a parking lot, no matter how it's used, it's still a parking lot. And I wonder who of you would like to have a parking lot next to you. We are in that location as long as BMW. There's maybe a year difference between the 2 histories of this thing. And if you look at BMW's pictures that they have shown to you of that present area, you can easily recognize that they have been a lousy neighbor. They haven't done a thing in the back of that is any way meaningful in terms of mitigation of what that lot looks like right now. And we will benefit to some degree by the hard work of the ARB, who have listened to us, and they've listened to us and then brought matters that we have proposed to the attention of BMW. The zoning board should have a big problem with this. And I'm talking about the big picture. You have right there in that same zoning classification, Land Rover and Jaguar and Whole Foods. They have the same zone. Other nearby commercial properties, and I'm thinking specifically of the Chevy dealer just down the road on the other side of 95, who use the concept to expand. Now I'm going to ask you to sort of flip the coin. BMW came to you asking for the increase from 25% coverage from 25 to 30 feet. They use comparisons to downtown, the downtown area, and what is permitted down there. Well, let's flip that coin. If I were downtown, I know I could enhance my property in several ways by asking for rooftop parking. I certainly would be doing it if I were Jaguar. I would certainly do it if I were Whole Foods. And I would suspect that one of the next applications you'll have will be to have the mini property, which will be used to sell used BMW cars, have some parking on the roof up there. That's only speculative, but I think BMW should keep that in their mind when they're doing this. Now, putting parking structure adjacent to a residential area. There are 60 homes there. They've been there just as long as BMW. And I think that should have some special handling when you're talking this kind of operation next to a residential zone. As to the building itself, ARB has been very helpful. landscape screening, lighting, sound, appearance of the building. They have been great. BMW listened to ARB. They rarely listen to us, the homeowners. And if you'll recall, the first night I spoke to you, I made mention of the fact that in their original application, they never mentioned that they were adjacent to a residential area. Now, no amount of screening can overcome the goings on of a parking lot. We understand, now this is very important, we understand BMW's need for efficient service and an updated customer reception area. We also understand their need for parking. Now, we have offered several alternatives to BMW, and I will tell you that they were presumptively dismissed. Their attitude was totally dismissive. Why do I say presumptive? One of their constant answers was the zoning board would never permit this. They didn't permit it in the past. They won't permit it now. Don't bother with that. They were dismissive to us and saying, oh, that is too expensive. That will never work. Well, we know they need parking, and there are a considerable number of ways to give them virtually the same number of parking spaces that they're talking about. They'll need the support of the zoning board. There's no question. They would probably need the assistance of the technical staff, the administrative staff of the zoning board, who I'm sure could come up with some better ideas than putting a parking on the roof adjacent to our homes. So I would hope that the board would force BMW to consider a number of parking alternatives that would be appropriate to give them the number of spaces that they need. In the alternative, in the last alternative, maybe they could learn to live with a few less parking spaces. That would be an interesting concept because they're already overstressed on that property. They have to rent from the town. They have to rent from Whole Foods to continue their operation. So I ask that you step forward, pick up the ball, and look at the big picture in addition to all the minor details that have been brought forward to you. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you very much for your comments. Would anybody else like to speak to this application? Okay, I don't see anybody else. Back to Wilder. Right, Wilder, do you have anything to add? We're looking to close this application tonight, right? There's no reason to keep it open, right?
Yeah, unless there's something else, but
We're looking to close, which we're
If you're,
pretty much finished, so we're ready to close. You want to comment before we do anything else?
I'd like to comment, we would like to respond, and the idea would be, the only reason to hold it open would be to receive the ARB report. But there would be no further back and forth or anything like that, right?
No, we don't. It's the ARB's already chimed in once or twice. We waiting for them for anything?
We don't have a report yet from them, no final report.
Report.
well,
And
let me check that, Wilder. I know you've been to ARB 3 or 4 times, I think.
we've been to ARB 4 times, and we're going March 16th for the 5th time.
Is that a problem?
No.
It's unusual.
Well, we do have a letter in the record, Wilder, dated January 27th from the ARB. So
I don't understand why we can't see their report.
You already have a letter from them once.
Do we have their final report? It's a
Right,
simple
well-
question. No? Okay.
Excuse
Do
me.
we have,
So
My understanding is the ARB is meeting again on the 16th to meet and issue any, have any final discussion comments. That was my understanding of the last meeting, so I would support keeping the hearing open. for the purposes of receiving that report and continuing to give members of the public opportunity to engage with the ARB before then. I don't think that it's appropriate to limit, the hearing is held open, a hearing is held open. I don't think it's appropriate to limit who and what can be said between now and the time the hearing is closed.
I guess it's a question for the Planning and Zoning Commission, whether they wish to leave the hearing open.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me. All right, let's take a poll. I'm looking for a motion to close the hearing, but does anyone want to keep it open to wait for another letter from ARB?
It's not a letter, it's their report, isn't it? Isn't there a difference between a letter and their final report?
They're
Right, at the January 27th, in the first paragraph, the end of the first paragraph, it says, at this
I'm
time, we
asking-
are not able to issue a favorable report since there are several items that have not been satisfactorily addressed. So whether at the March 16th meeting, which is their next meeting, they get to this and issue a report, entirely possible. There is a chance that they don't get to it like they didn't get to it at the last meeting. But certainly the Planning and Zoning Commission can continue this to March 23rd. And at that time, take in whatever other information there is.
okay. George, Relly, what do you think? Close or
I
no
would
close?
give due deference to ARB and wait for their report.
Jennifer Leahy?
Let's go ahead. So I don't want you to continue it until we have a chance to put some of our experts' testimony on the record in response to the comments we've received tonight, if possible.
You also want to keep it open.
So
To the
you want to
keep
keep
it open.
Kara, I got it, Kara.
Steve, I mean, you got to stop yelling at everyone.
Well, do you want to keep it open so you can respond?
Well, if we were going to close it and hold it open solely for the purpose of receiving the ARB report, I'm prepared to submit all of our materials in response to what you've heard tonight. And then but if you're going to say we have to keep it open and accept public comment going forward, if you vote to say keep it open solely to hear the ARB report, then I'll put everything in and we could probably terminate this. But I would prefer to wait until we get all the public comments and respond.
Leave it open. Yeah. We'll leave it open. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
But
All right,
I would like also to have some response from my experts tonight in the hopes that I may not necessarily need to bring them back next time.
That's, I mean, it's whatever you can bring it back if you want to, but we're going to keep the hearing open to wait for the ARB report. If you want the final report, if they issue a final report, they may not issue a final report. Who knows? But we can keep it open to after that 16th meeting, right?
Right, well,
Yeah.
why don't we do that? Just continue it, and then we'll be prepared to respond to, Craig, do you have any thoughts on this, Craig?
No. I think it sounds like it's going to get kept open, and we have an opportunity to provide an organized rebuttal to the comments we heard tonight.
Yeah, and we'll get a chance then to review Dave Keating's memo, and Jackie's, I think, had a submission to him. We should look at that and be prepared to respond. So,
That's okay. So let's continue the meeting to
Tuesday, March 23rd, 7:30 p.m. online.
could I ask one other request? That
Sure.
if Jackie or the neighbors are going to submit anything in addition to what they've submitted, that it be provided the Friday before the 23rd, so that we would have a chance to review it in advance of the meeting and be able to respond.
Yeah, I mean, that's a courtesy, but you know that someone can submit comments at the meeting or 5 minutes before the meeting.
I would request that courtesy because we have endeavored to provide that to the neighbors, and I would hope that they would reciprocate.
That's between you and Attorney Kaufman. Okay.
Now, can we confirm we
No,
don't need Mr. Yanis or Mr. Galante at the next meeting?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No. We don't need Joe Canis or Michael Galante. They're all done. They submitted their reports. I don't know if you want to bring back Martin Shift or not. That's up to you. We didn't hear from him tonight.
I do want to bring Martin Schiff back. I would like, and you know what, we'll just have John Canning come back then too as well. Okay.
Okay, so this meeting is continued to,
Tuesday, March 23rd, 7:30 PM.
great, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
next item up for bid. Continuation of public hearing regarding coastal site plan review number 354, flood damage prevention application number 404, land filling and application number 495, Michael and Justine Mullin, 8 Nickerson Lane. This is the house that's proposed to, it's a new house.
Right, this is a proposed pool house on Nickerson Lane.
It's in the corner.
Right, Doug DeVesta, the engineer, is running a little behind schedule. He had another
I'm here.
meeting.
I'm here.
Good. I didn't see you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. So Doug DeVesta submitted revised plans, which we were emailed out to the commission. I have your copy
Thank you.
right here.
Got it.
So you have those for the record, the 2 sheets of plans with the cover letter from Mr. DeVesta, as well as a letter from the neighbor, Mr. Wigan, who is to the west of this property. You may recall at the last meeting, there was concern from Mr. Wigan about the proposed drainage and whether there's any existing pipes that could affect the installation of that drainage system or other things that the applicant could do to try to minimize the amount of water that flows onto his property, both directly and indirectly. Mr. DeVesta went out to the site on Thursday with the builder, Jeff Scalise, to look at the situation, and the plan you have on the screen, this is sheet 1 of 2, shows some changes, and Mr. DeVesta is going to go through those changes with you tonight.
Good. Did you find this pipe?
For the record, Doug DeVesta, professional engineer, represent the applicant. We did not see the pipe directly, but we did see evidence that there was something under the ground that caused snow melt. I can show you some photographs that we took that day. This is a photograph that we took looking from Mr. Wiggins' property, looking back up towards my client's property, and you'll see snow melt through here. So this is sort of indicating that there is some kind of movement, pipe or water or whatever, because the snow has melted across that area there. We have permission to go on to Mr. Wiggins' property as well. And we did not, there was no evidence of any pipe on the ground, but the area was soggy, was saturated. But we did talk to Mr. Wiggins, and we said that we would come up with a solution, because what we think what's happening, there's a sump pump discharge that was put in by the previous owner, coming out of this corner of the basement and heading in a westerly direction and through the snow melt areas about where my cursor is going through here. And by the construction of this proposed pool house, it most likely will be hit. So what we propose to do is to disconnect it, cut it off, and then provide infiltration trenches. There's 4 infiltration trenches, 45 feet long each, 5 foot wide, filled with stone. And then the discharge will go into the system and then work its way through the infiltration trenches. You think of this as a septic system, just like a leaching system from a leaching system for a septic system. It's kind of the same principle. What we did is we did some calculations, tried to determine the volume of water that would be coming out of that sump pump. So what we did for analysis, we looked at the perimeter of the structure, the width of it. So we got a area. We made some assumptions, a depth of groundwater in the area. We utilized a test hole that we dug up in where the proposed septic or the proposed drainage system was going for the roof areas, and then took a 2 foot at 2 feet to that, came up with a volume, and then we calculated that into a volume of stone based on the width, diameter, and width, length, and depth of the stone in the pipe. And that's how we came up with this configuration and the volume of water. Having this separated like this will allow some of the infiltration to go through into the soil itself, so it won't get any hydraulic mounding in the area. Again, and this system will be approximately 50 feet from the property line to the lowest trench, or the closest trench to the westerly property line. So we feel, in our opinion, that this is a solution that would keep the water from going into Mr. Wiggins' property through the discharge of a sump pump that was done, I think almost 18 years ago. One other thing we did too is we added another 2 more pieces of Coltech units to this drainage system here to give extra volume for this area, so we don't have any issues from this drainage system from the roof areas. Mr. Wiggins submitted a letter to Jeremy this afternoon regarding the plans. I believe he did see our plans, and we did, he was grateful that we did look at addressing. We took his comments and concerns seriously, and we came up with a solution. And he just had some comments about his about the drawings there, and one of them was about the capacity of the 4 interconnecting trenches, which I just described to you as what we're doing and how we come up with those numbers and the approximate volume of water coming from that sump pump area. The other question he had about surface flows, giving the impervious areas from the proposed patio and the roof areas, and how is that going to affect his property. Again, that area, this proposed patio area is going to have a channel drain that's going to collect the water from this section of the patio. These patios here are existing, and the pool is existing. And then the proposed pool house, those will all be collected and discharged into the series of Coltech units along the property line. I went one step further today, and I looked at water, quantity of water runoff volume. I mean, runoff from the site versus just water quality, and utilizing the area, which I'm highlighting now as the drainage area. I looked at the 2, 10, 25, and 50-year design storms going into our detention system here, and we do show a reduction in runoff for the 4 storms that typically what we would do in other parts of the town other than close to the coastal that we had there. So again, looking at what we're proposing will be a reduction in runoff, and also pre-development, this runoff from the edge of the pool area, which I'm highlighting here, was running off towards the side of the property. Now with the patio and the pool house being collected and being detained in here, that's less water going into that area towards the Wiggins property. He also talked about possibly putting some plantings along this edge of the property that can provide some uptake of groundwater, or water going onto his property, surface waters. That's something we certainly can talk to our client. Maybe my client would like to screen this back of the pool house from Mr. Wiggins' property. So that's something we can certainly talk about with my client and see if he's willing to do something like that. He's asked about the sequence of construction and when will this be installed. This is going to be a slab on grade, but there will be some footings to support the slab. So when we're putting the slab into constructing of the pool house, we will most likely encounter this sump pump discharge. So this will be done fairly quickly early on in the process, because obviously we have a sump pump going into an excavation that's going to cause problems during the excavation for the footings for the slab on grade here. So again, this will be done fairly soon into the process. And inspections, the town does not typically inspect a private drainage system, so that will fall under my review and my inspection during the installation, make sure it's installed according to the plan and installed properly. So we will be signing off on, or I will be signing off on something like this. And then maintenance, you're looking at potentially you're looking at groundwater coming out of a sump pump. So really there's not going to be much sediment getting into here. So really there won't be much maintenance in terms of the infiltration trenches for the footing drains. In terms of the maintenance for the Coltech units, there is a channel drain that will have to be inspected annually. Any debris get caught in there would be cleaned out, and also keeping the gutters and the drainage system, the gutters on the pool house clean, for they will not get into the Coltech system. So really, again, the revisions of the plan provided additional infiltration for the existing sump pump. Also added 2 more units to the Coltech units, and we did shift the construction access further to the west, because this where we typically had it in the center here, but that's where the infiltration trenches are going to go. So we want to keep that area clear. That's basically the revisions to the plans. If the commission has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Great, thank you, Doug. So it sounds like there is some kind of pipe there, and that it's going to be cut off and moved.
Correct.
With regards to this, to the sump pump, is that something that's only used when the basement floods, or is it used like every day?
We didn't go in the basement to see how often it pumps out, but I mean, if it's this time of year, you're probably going to be running it fairly often. Summertime, less, groundwater's lower. It'll be less frequent.
Okay, that's fine. All right, understood. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. DeVesta? I'll get to you, Mr. Wiggins, in 1 second. Just checking on the commissioners. Everyone's good. George, you're good. Kara's good. Jen's good, and Jim's good. Okay. Mr. Wiggins, you're a member of the public who would like to speak to this. Thank you for your time in identifying that pipe, because they would have found it someday when they were digging a hole, and now they know it's there. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. Just for the record, I'm Alec Wiggin. I'm on the adjacent property. The first thing I said in my letter, I just want everybody to understand that I see that a very significant effort has been made in consequence of the issues I raised the last time. So I'm very grateful for that, and I thank everybody concerned. Doug, you just used my letter as reference, I think, and if it's okay, I'm going to do the same thing. One thing that, well, just with respect to this sump pump, the prior owners explained to me that the issue they had was a pipe coming down from the O'Neill properties in the Heights. And it's a pipe that runs all the way down underneath their house, goes across Nickerson Lane, parallel with Nearwater Lane, and empties into the Holly Pond there. So the offending issue is this drainage pipe that comes from Roten Heights. So although, I'm not qualified to say, well, the issue I'm trying to run at is just capacity. If it's a pipe that's coming from up there, it's influenced presumably mostly by what happens up there, to some degree what happens locally, but most of what happens up there. So I do have some concern that there is flow that from this sump pump that you might think, well, an ordinary basement collecting something due to rain locally would require X amount of trenches, but a pipe that's running to, from a considerable height, that's running to alleviate the water problem, well, 3/4 of a half mile away, could have logically much higher flow. So so one of the questions I have, and to some extent, Doug, you've answered it, but when folks say, well, it's a sump pump used to bail out the basement, well, that's accurate, but not the full story. And so I am asking the question of, has the capacity of the trenches proposed been matched in some way with measuring the flow? And maybe the commission thinks it's been adequately addressed, and But I do think it's logical to raise it in the context of where does this flow come from? It's really not local. It's from someplace else, and it does require being pumped out. So, so I just placing that on the table. And on the same issue about the sump, I just want to make sure that when this plan is approved, that it's approved as a condition of the approval of the plan. This discharge pipe, this sump discharge pipe, will be located, will be diverted into these trenches, because it seems like sometimes we talk about if the pipe is encountered, this is what we'll do. And I don't think that's language is strong enough. I think there should be strong language that says this pipe does exist and it needs to be diverted. And this is the plan by which it will be diverted when this plan is approved. So I'm hoping I can get some assurances that way. Next issue I was going to talk about was surface flow, and it's terrific that Caltech has been expanded. And I can't read this thing that well, so thank you very much for addressing the idea of where the patio water goes and things like that that concern me. But I want to also raise, though, because this is the time, the grading behind the pool house is being raised by about 3 feet. And it has about 25 feet before it hits my property. So that's why I raised the issue of, I don't know, perhaps tilting that toward the Caltech, or if that doesn't work, putting some plants there, because I think, you know, if you go up 3 feet, and it has, you know, it's changing the slope significantly, and I think that can only increase the shedding that would happen there. And if there isn't something that is purposeful about trying to address that, I think it just means I get more water shedding into my property. So that's something I'd like commented on, that grading right there in particular. And I do appreciate what you just said, which is that the sequence of work, the likelihood is that these trenches, when built, will be built somewhere near the beginning of the project. Mr. Maslin had suggested just putting in something or a request that they be completed prior to, what was it, construction above the foundation, just so, I don't know, they get done. And it probably makes sense to get them done because you don't want to busted or crushed pipe, you know, affecting your ability to put the foundation in. So, let's see. Oh, you addressed inspection. I guess I don't know code, so I just assume that because buildings need to be inspected when they're erected, that these improvements will be inspected by the town. But if there's no regulation for that, then it'll be under the jurisdiction of the engineers. And so that's just something I live with. And the idea that you did address that some of these things would have to be maintained, I was thinking that the effectiveness of the trenches, the sump pump trenches, would require some kind of I don't know, some kind of inspection, like are they still, you know, working properly? I don't know what the right term is there, but so I wonder if, having said all those things, is there additional comment that somebody could offer?
Yes, I'll try to answer some of your questions if I can do it quickly, and then I'm going to make sure Doug chimes in, and then Jeremy will make 2 comments. One, with regards to the site plan you see on the screen, that shows the new trenches. So that's the site plan that's going to be approved. So those trenches have to be there. They can't not build it. At the end of the project, we required as-built survey. And the as-built is stamped by a professional engineer, which is most likely going to be Doug DeVesta. And it has to be approved, so he has to certify that those trenches are there. And then everything that you see on the plan was built as per specs. With regards to, this is one thing I don't 100% understand. There's this trench that goes here. Doug, do you know where it ends now? Is it just pass through this property and go into the next property? I mean, it's not at Holly Pond, so it's not, it doesn't eventually end at Holly Pond, or it's just.
Well, it's the old soldier, I don't want to call it the buildings that.
Yeah, Darren Osterman put it in his memo.
Right,
Yeah.
it's just the old soldier pipe, and that comes in from the development that's across the street from the Rowan Heights Fire Department there. That was the sewer line back in the day, back in the 1800s, I think Darren was telling me. And then that came down all through the area, down this direction here. And it's been abandoned for years. It has to go across 95 now, so there's really, the flow is only coming, if anything coming through this system, it would be any groundwater from leaking. And there is a manhole that's been plugged on this property here. Darren has told me about it. It's been plugged, it's concreted up. So any water that's in this pipe is just infiltration through joints. The actual location of it, don't really know. There's really no records of it. And how much water is going through there, that's anybody's guess. We really don't have a feel for where that water, how much water is going through it. Is it a trickle? Is it a full size pipe? We don't know, because there's really no records of it. So what we thought we did some conservative numbers of calculating the volume of water that's coming through here. Again, we figuring out the amount of groundwater, that's very difficult to do. Water, you figure out the volume of water through a pipe, we can figure that out through various formulas. But again, if this pipe is coming through here and it's picking up water in the sump here, it's hard to say how much water is coming through here. And we looked at it in terms of strictly looking at it in terms of I mentioned earlier, the perimeter of the building, the width of the building, and the potential depth of groundwater, which I thought was very conservative of saying how much water is coming through there. But if there's a pipe down there, if Mr. Wiggins knows the size of it and exactly where it is, we might be able to do some calculations. But again, it's groundwater. It's hard to figure that out.
Sorry about that. I muted myself. Yeah, because I'm looking at the Darren's memo again. It says if the pipe is found, if the abandoned sewer line is encountered, it must be located on a map and abandoned further to prevent illicit connections from affecting living spaces on this property. So if you run into this soldier pipe,
then we will definitely locate it at that point. But
it's going to be on your as-built survey.
Some way, right. But if you don't encounter it, well, then we're not going to be able to tell you where it is. So,
yeah. I mean, you're not digging up the yard searching for it.
No, we're not.
With regards to the maintenance notice, Mr. Wiggins, as per Jeremy, you can answer this. This has to be filed on the land records, right?
Right. As part of Doug's original submittal, he issued a drainage report, and one of the appendices in that report is the maintenance plan for the proposed Caltech units. He noted tonight that the trench drains really don't have any maintenance to them, so it would be only the Caltech units that have a maintenance program, which is outlined in his report. As part of any commission approval, there would be a requirement that a notice of drainage maintenance plan get filed in the land records such that this owner and future owners would be aware of this maintenance requirement for the Caltech units.
I think those are your big three questions, Mr. Wiggins. Yep, you can answer another one. Go ahead.
Thanks. Well, listen, I think you guys have done
you're really coming at my issues straight on, and I appreciate that very much. I do know, I say I know, I think I know that the town is aware of this pipe because when the Rabins were in the house, I think they explored having the pipe roto-rooted from the end of it, the discharge in Holly Pond, up toward their house to see if that, they could, I don't know, have the flow through continue. At least that was something that was considered. So, and the town, town was able to find the pipe down in Holly Pond. So it's not a total mystery. And I'll just put that in, for future reference, because the town has found it before. Well, I thank you. I appreciate the clarification and the consideration. So thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Yeah, dealing with that pipe, if it does exist, the soldier pipe is part of the recommendations by Darren Oz to find the Assistant Director of Public Works. And I'm sure we're going to weave that into the resolution. Okay, great. Would anybody else, thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to make a comment on this application? You're all set, Doug?
Yes, I am.
I would entertain a motion to close this application. Kara made the motion, George made the second. Okay, motion, the application's closed. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
I want to say thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
This is yours. I did write out. Okay. That is the end of our public hearing. Now we're going to move into the general meeting. We have a couple items on our general meeting. The first one is amendment to special permit number 248B as in boy, site plan 1020 Post Road, 1020 Boston Road, CBD zone. Request to add outdoor dining along the side of the building and behind the building. This is it's a general business item. We have a new proposed application for it. Yep, there it is. Where is it? Yeah, here it is. This is Callari. That's different. Mr. Genovese is going to put this for the commissioners that don't know or don't remember it. It wasn't on here. In what was it? Fred, was it 2015? We proposed the pergola behind Oli Moly. Is that what it was?
It was 2015. Yes, it was. The commission approved a pergola, a wood deck, and awning in connection with the restaurant there at that time. That was put on the agenda as a general meeting item as an amendment to the business's special permit.
So that was well received by, I guess, the applicant, and now it looks like Mr. Genovese wants to put the same thing on his other building. Mr. Genovese, want to explain to us what you got here, sir?
Sure. Can I share my screen, Fred? And can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Yeah,
Okay, great. I got a new headset, so I'm not sure if it works.
We like your new headset, sir.
It's lighter than the old one. We're wearing them so much now, it's terrifying. Okay, so is my screen shared?
Not yet.
You should be able to grab it there, David.
There it is.
Can you see the PowerPoint or do you see the zoning regulations?
We see the PowerPoint.
Okay, great. So thank you so much. I'm David Genovese. I'm the principal of Baywater Properties and the original developer and owner of the building at 1020 Post Road. With me tonight is also from my team, Sonia Tralson and Kate Perez of Baywater, Eric Rains of Eric Rains Landscape Architecture, who worked with us to design this project, and also, most importantly, David Nelson and I think Jim Sullivan from 1020 Post. They're the owners of the restaurant. So basically, we come to this application. It's amazing that this building opened in 2008. 1020 was one of the first tenants that opened in the building. And they've been with us since then and have become really kind of a pillar of the Darien restaurant community. Over the course of COVID, we've learned a lot about what people want, and we've seen what happened in Darien, but also what happened in Greenwich and some of the other neighboring towns who've really amplified outdoor dining. And we don't think that that trend will go away. We think that people will continue to want outdoor dining as an opportunity. And it being almost 13 years since 1020 opened, to be totally candid with you, the lease is expiring in 2 years. And David Nelson and I started a dialogue during COVID around what we were going to do to kind of reposition the restaurant for success for the next 15 years. And having watched what we watched, we came upon this idea of expanding the outdoor dining. So we are, let me just touch on one thing too that you were kind of dealing with in the context of your BMW discussion. We are actually in the midst of the ARB process. We've had a meeting with ARB. We're going back on March 16th. We basically, I would say that we are like 95% approved. They liked the idea, but they made some suggestions as to plantings, and they wanted a little bit more detail on the lighting. But I would say that in general, I think it's fair for me to say that the ARB was very supportive of the idea and the approach. And I have some images that I'd like to show you and take you through it. And actually, before I do that, I just want to point out that this application and any of our applications at 1020 Post are a lot different than I think most of the other applications that you've seen over the last few years. When we proposed to build 1020 Post Road, we actually had at the time bought 36 Old Kings Highway South, which we've recently finished renovating. And we actually made a gift to the town of a permanent right to use our parking at both 1020 Post Road and 36 Old Kings Highway South, even though in candor, we were not asking for any redevelopment opportunity at 36 Old Kings Highway South. We used the building at 1020 Post Road to reconfigure that entire portion of the 36 Old Kings Highway, or the Center Street parking lot, and we tied everything together, and we basically gave voluntarily a right for anyone to park in these parking lots on nights and on weekends. So this parking, and also the parking at 36 Old Kings Highway, supports the Goose. It supports other restaurants, and that will continue as we tie everything together with the Corbin project. So let me show you a couple of pictures. Oh, and in exchange for, importantly, under Section 1057 of the Darien zoning regulations, in exchange for the gift of parking that we gave to the town and the creation of the additional parking, this building is actually exempt from the on-site parking requirements in the town regulations. So, we own, the convenient thing is also that we own all of the properties in the vicinity, or most of the properties in the vicinity. So the reality of it is, I think you would mostly agree that, you've never really gotten complaints from anyone about our creating a parking problem here. We kind of manage it ourselves by working with the tenants. The memo that I gave you kind of outlines the existing table count and seat count, and then the proposed table count and seat count. Just this is an aerial view showing the initial outdoor dining. This is the pergola that we installed, through that application that Chairman Mulvaney referenced earlier. This is the patio in operation last year, or 2 years ago, I think, pre-COVID. This is the driveway and the walkway that kind of goes down the driveway. And this is a drawing that Eric Rains prepared, and Eric is here in case we want to ask him any questions. But basically what we're proposing to do is take this existing situation, convert it into a new pergola structure that would provide some shade, but also just a better definition and make it feel more like an indoor-outdoor room. There would be a lounge seating area alongside the building. The materials are different. Under the pergola, it's a brick reuse of the existing brick pavers. And then along this building and along the side, we're actually replacing the brick with flagstone or stone. And these are some images that just show you the expanded pergola in the back of 1020, the seating along the driveway, which would not reach beyond the existing coach lamp lights. So it doesn't change in any way let me just go back for a second. It doesn't change the ability for a pedestrian walking through this way to get to the back parking lot. This building also does have a center passageway through the building. So there's two ways to get to the Center Street lot from this building, given its design. You know, the images that we've talked about, the site plan, and then just some images of what was happening during COVID, during the pandemic. David and his team strung these catenary lights around the building, in front of the building. And, you know, to be candid, we found in years past that people did not have interest in dining on the Post Road. That fundamentally changed in the last year. And again, we think that that will continue, and that's why we're trying to get ahead of it. And it really created just a great sense of vibrancy on the Post Road. And as you can see, there was plenty of space for people to walk, you know, past the trees and in the area between the seating and the trees. And the good news is we won't be, hopefully by next summer, we won't be subject to the, you know, social distancing requirements and so on, or at least not for too much longer. These are just some other images of the idea. And also candidly, what we're trying to do is really position 1020 for success when the Corbin project is completed in 2023. You know, there will be new restaurants. There will be other restaurants that will be a part of the project. We're finalizing some leases now with a number of restaurants and retailers. And we just want to make sure that 1020, who's been such a pillar of our community, is positioned for success in the future. And we think that this application is a great way to do it. So we're proposing to try to get going on this work. Some of this material, like the pergola structure, has a long lead time. When we do this as the landlord or the real estate provider to 1020 Post, David and Jim Sullivan are actually also going to be doing a cosmetic renovation to the interior of the restaurant. You know, it having been 13 or 14 years, we just felt that it was time to kind of, you know, to polish it up and kind of build upon the great base of business that they have created in our town. We love these guys, and we want to position them for success in the future. So that's really our presentation. Eric is here. If you have any detailed questions around the design, I can answer any questions around zoning issues and so on. I can try my best. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
No, that's great, David. I appreciate it. The only thing I just want to make sure that we're clear. So if you look at the one thing, and Mr. Raines, maybe he can just confirm. If you look at one of your proposed conditions, you're basically just taking out those bushes
along the driveway. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes, we're removing those. This is Eric Raines for the record. Yes, we're removing those evergreen shrubs that are along the base of the building in the photograph there, and we're reusing them around the new reconfigured terrace and pergola area.
Fantastic. What about those lights? Are those lights going away that's inside the thing?
The bollard lights that are in the photo, David, if you go back to that existing conditions photo there, those bollard lights go away.
Okay, that's fine. They're gonna be inside. So we got a pergola at the other one. We're gonna have a pergola at this one.
Correct.
Makes
it will be
sense to me.
different. It will be a more natural wood color. It won't be
I saw
painted
that.
white. So the idea, and again, that's a topic we've been discussing with ARB, but the idea is to have it contrast with the other and not make it look too uniform.
Cool. Okay. I'm good. Anybody else have any questions? Jim's good. Kara, you okay, Kara? George, you all right? Jennifer's okay? Yep. All right. What do we do? Just vote on this?
Yeah, general meeting item, you can vote on it. Yeah.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve as the submitted. Jennifer, looking for a second. Jim, all those in favor?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6. You're good to go, Mr. Genovese.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it. This is something we want to kind of launch in May, so we have to kind of jump on it in terms of construction.
You gotta go get your pergola.
We gotta finish on March 16th, and then it'll be a sprint. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank
Oh, did someone have a question?
I said on the number, you said 6.
Oh, sure.
How are there 6? I just didn't see Larry was here.
It's
5.
5.
It's 550.
Thanks.
But just for the record, I don't think McSorley's has ever been renovated on the inside. That's a good bar.
Darien expectations, they're a little higher than the McSorley's crowd.
So last I checked, McSorley was pretty fun. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great. Next item. All right, possible deliberations and decisions regarding landfilling and regrading application number 494, Jeffrey and Rebecca Morrison, 13 Prospect Avenue. We have a draft resolution on this one, right? I got one. Okay. This was they knocked down a house and built a new one?
Nope, this is additions and alterations to the existing house on Prospect with some grading right in front of the house, between the house and the road, and a new drainage system in the back.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments, scrivener's errors, changes? I see Mrs. Morrison is here. Jen, you good? George Riding Laney typos? No, these guys are doing a good job, huh? Carrie, you good? Any questions? Over 90 days. Okay. With that said, I would look for a motion to approve from Jim Rand. Looking for a second.
Thank you.
Eric Gately. Okay. All those in favor?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Mrs. Morrison, you got your thing approved.
Thank
Go call
you.
your contractor. You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, next item up for bid. Deliberations only and other public hearings closed on February 23rd. Coastal site plan review number 73, Bees and Boy, flood damage prevention application number 61B, land filling and regrading application number 493, Sam Fuller, 40 Contentment Island Road. This is the application we saw last week. Was it last week? Or 2 weeks ago? Was it
2 weeks ago.
Was 2 weeks ago? We had last week off.
Maybe last week.
Sam Fuller, who's a developer, a regional developer, is knocking down his own house, filling in part of the property 6 feet in certain aspects, I think.
Right, the lower part, especially near the garage, and then putting a complying house on top of that fill platform, we'll call it.
Right.
And then there were other, regrading, flood, coastal. We talked about the tree that would be cut to accommodate Ms. Castell across the street.
Yep.
And the driveway, instead of being dead flat now, will go up, which will allow the new house to be compliant with the flood regulations.
Right. And then he asked for one relative to the height of the house. We talked about the one that was graded and not graded.
Right.
Okay. Got it. Me personally, I think Mr. Fuller did a great job explaining to us, was very candid and vocal, and told us everything he could and fully disclosed everything he was doing. And he showed us those lousy pictures of his house flooding 4 feet, which was no fun. Anybody have any questions, comments? No, the only neighbor that came was Mrs. Gastel, who's on the ARB, and she basically was very happy and appreciative of it. She just wanted that tree to go away. Okay. Anybody have any concerns? Okay, looks like no. So with that said, Jeremy, can you draft an approval for that one?
Yep.
All right. The next one, landfilling and grading application number 496, Kenneth and Clara Cole at 281 Hollow Tree Ridge Road.
It's the vacant lot where engineer Craig Flaherty designed a new house with associated grading and drainage system. You remember there was a lot of concern from the neighbor downstream, making sure that they don't get more water. And Craig ran through that at the public hearing.
It was a lot. Why was it a lot? It had a house at one point in time.
It had a house, used to have a house, that house was taken down. So it is currently vacant.
Yeah, okay. Pretty straightforward. Any questions, comments relative to that one? We closed the hearing the same night. There's a parking court in front. Pretty straightforward. Everybody good? So with that said or not said,
okay, we'll draft something for
a resolution to approve it.
Yep.
Okay. Next thing, approval of minutes. We might get out of here at 10 o'clock, by the way. I'd shoot for that. What's this?
January 26th, right here.
Yeah. Do you mind? Yeah, these are ones we punted these from last go around. Here's the last one. First one's January 26th. We had the house on Beach Drive. We talked about that. There's a resolution in here from Beach Drive. which you can't touch anyway. Then we had the house on Pasture Lane. The resolution for Pasture Lane, those are the 2 new houses that we approved. What else? We got the other house next door on 34 Pasture Lane. That one was fine. What else? And we had the Haggany's house on Pasture where they're putting in a pool and all that good stuff. We approved that one. And then we talked about, what is this? Oh, that was 7-Eleven. We have more 7-Eleven stuff. Come on, no, which 7-Eleven was this one? This was the
January 26th meeting.
right. Traffic engineer. And that was pretty much it. Questions, comments, scrivener's errors, typos, anything in this one? Nope. Looking for a motion to approve as submitted. Jennifer Leahy, looking for a second. Jim Rand. All in favor? 5-0. Great. Next one, approval of minutes, February 2nd. This was another 7-Eleven meeting. This was the David Genovese read his email. Becky Kennedy talked again. Multiple principal use.
Kara, you weren't at the meeting of the 26th, I don't think. So will you abstain on that, or did you watch the meeting?
I watched it, but I'm happy to abstain.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Subdivision of, then we had the general meeting, which is the Indian Trail subdivision. And we had their resolution on that one, which you can't change anyway. Special permit application, ELD properties. That was Compass. We punted that, right?
Yeah, Compass's application has since been withdrawn.
Yep. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Chairman's report. Okay. Looking for a motion to approve these minutes, February 2nd as submitted. Anything we changed, any typos, questions, comments? No? Motion approved by Jennifer. Looking for a second. Jim Rand again. All in favor? This is going to be 4-0.
5.
Okay. Kara said yes, but
She watched it.
oh, good. Okay.
Right, Kara, you watched February 2nd as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I watched the whole one.
Beautiful.
Watch the whole. That's tough sled. Next one, February 9th, which is 2 weeks ago, which was really just the Callari one, right?
Yeah, most of the first hour of the hearing was presentation, hour and a half. So that was most of the meeting.
Right, and then we talked about Compass again, and it got postponed.
Yeah.
And then Make Modern, we approved their thing, approval of minutes, and chairman's report of the commissioner. What's it? The subcommittee, it was a little subcommittee report that was in there. This is for that's it.
Yep.
Looking for a motion. Any questions, comments, typos, scrivener's errors? No. Looking for a motion to approve as submitted. George Riley, there he is. He's got his pen going now. Looking for a second. Jennifer, all right. All in favor? Moving right along.
5-0.
5-0. Fantastic. There we go. Done. We did that. Chairman's report. Are we doing the letter? Or is that kind of subcommittee
Yeah,
report?
that would be subcommittee report. Do you have the letter?
Yeah. My typos. To the chairman's report, we don't need a chairman's report. This fall in the subcommittee or chairman?
Subcommittee.
Okay. Then the chairman has no report. So we'll skip that one. With regard to the subcommittee report, what I'd like to do is get anyone's question, comments on this letter. We got it it was sent to the subcommittee last week. Then it was sent to the full commission
Yesterday.
by email yesterday. And then this one we got, this is dated, so he did it yesterday, it's dated today?
Right, what we did, we took the draft that we had sent you and realized that since the letter applies to numerous pieces of legislation, we tried to figure out the best way to address it And so what we did, we referenced each of those pieces of legislation right at the top. And what Fred and I talked about was the possibility of, depending on what other legislation's coming through the pipeline, and the fact that some of these might be directed to the Housing Committee, and some might be Planning and Development. There might be numerous iterations of whatever letter you approve with just different reference to the bills and different committees.
Okay, so I did some handwritten changes to mine. I submitted it the same way, looking at it the same way as a resolution. I emailed them into Jeremy and whatnot, so those guys can fix it. I'll go over mine real quick and see if anybody likes them, doesn't like them, or we can switch them. But there's one thing I want to say in an overriding view is it talks about, the commission approving stuff, commission approving stuff. We have 2 or 3 professionals that work for the town, which is Jeremy, Fred, and Dave Keating, and you also have guys like
Woody and
Rich. All those guys are professionals. They've done it for years. I mean, no offense, but I don't know what AICP means.
Right, American Institute of Certified Planners. You have to be certified and get continued training and pass a test.
Right. These guys are professionals in the business. They know more about, Fred and Jerry both have the same qualifications. They know more about this stuff than anybody. I mean, I don't think a legislator or something should tell us what to do in our town. But what I want to say, and I added here in a couple spots, is review by our professionals that do it. Because we also, even on our commission, we have 2 lawyers. It's not required to have a lawyer, but we do have 2 lawyers. There are other lawyers in the building that we use. So the people that look at this stuff, most of them, a lot of them are professionals. The ones on staff are professionals. And even a guy like, I don't know what you'd call Sam Fuller. Sam Fuller had one of the best presentations that we saw in years. He's the chairman of the Affordable Housing Committee. That guy knows more about affordable housing, building it and financing it than anybody that I've ever met. That's the kind of guy that's in our town. So that's my overriding thing on this, is that we know what we're doing and we have professionals that work for us. But getting into specifics, first paragraph, 3 lines down, it says 169 communities, I wrote, in the state of Connecticut. The next paragraph down, locally elected officials largely eliminated long-standing established right of municipalities, not just our town, because this affects the entire state. So municipalities to manage its land uses. The other one, I skipped this one. In the first paragraph again is as the town of Darien continues to evolve, we believe that local control, review, which is what we do, and decision making is what we do, are essential to meet the current and future needs of our residents, protecting local environment and the rest of the stuff. So that's what I'm talking about. We review every application, we make a decision on it, and we have local control over it. If for some reason, our planning and zoning commission got disbanded, we wouldn't review it at all. It would go to somebody else. I mean, it was perfectly tonight that we reviewed this guy, the gentleman on the last application, we reviewed it. We had a bunch of people look at it, and then we're going to make a decision. We didn't make a decision yet. What else did I do? This is another one. The second page, after the bullet points, the second line, it says, these policies were best handled by Darien's own elected officials, which is us, and trained professionals, which is Fred and Jeremy and Rich and Woody and Dave Keating. Those guys are trained professionals. They're certified to do this stuff.
But do you want to be more specific, like trained
planning professionals, I guess?
Trained land use professionals.
But we also want to put, where do they work, right? Like I think being even more specific, the town of Darien hired professional, like they're hired, they go through a vetting process, they're interviewed. It's not just any trained professional.
The word I would say is trained professionals on staff.
Perfect. That's great.
Okay. Because I didn't add the word staff anywhere here, but these guys already work for the town.
Exactly.
I don't know, Fred, when you got your ACPI, but I gotta believe you came to our town with it. If you didn't have it, maybe you wouldn't have got the job. I don't know.
You got it pretty much right after.
Right, I remember that because I remember seeing you didn't have it after.
Should we add that? Sorry, should we add that again to the first page legislation paragraph where it says transfer decision making away from our locally elected officials and trained professionals on staff? Because there's some things that we don't necessarily see, but they do, and we trust them to do their jobs that they've been hired to do.
Correct. I can interpret our zoning rules. They wrote them. I would say yes to that.
Good.
Where else? Then, all right, then this is right in the next paragraph down. We have cited Darien as advocated for and made out. It says during the several decades. We started this, the memo, what was it, not a memo? The press release we sent out a year ago, right? It was right before, it was like February of last year before the pandemic.
Right.
We went back and did a 20-year study of everything we did. Our first real affordable housing project in Darien was Avalon, which was approved in 1998. So that memo talked about for the last 20 years, we've done X, Y, and Z. So instead of saying during the several decades, I wrote 2 decades versus several. And then throughout.
I mean, this is like line edits. Just submit them.
What's that?
I mean, you're going line by line. Do we have to like?
Well, I'm almost done. I'm almost done.
Several or 2 is not material.
Okay. And
You're
then,
signing it.
the next paragraph down, it talks about we'll continue to review projects and applications. What else is important? Yeah, and then this was a little tote in your own hold. The very last page on that one. Best way forward, and Darien has been doing for the past 2 decades. On the bottom, since we've already been doing it. And the only thing I did at the very end, it says we would honor our shared successes with others and welcome them to visit us. We've never met any of these guys, right? Have they ever been here? Yeah, that's what it said.
Yeah, but they have.
That's me.
They have.
What's that?
They have been here.
They never met with Jeremy.
How do you know that? Bob Duff and people proposing this legislation haven't been here? They have been here.
Right. Okay. Anybody else have any comments to this?
I did want to pick on one item just quickly, I hope and assume, but in the penultimate paragraph of the second page, it talks about P&Z partially in response to ongoing housing and zoning reform discussions throughout the state and within our own community, is currently in the process of undertaking numerous zoning amendments, et cetera. These amendments include changes regarding accessory dwelling units, inclusionary zoning standards, parking requirements, and elimination of minimum house/apartment sizes. That last one, didn't that occur with some case law some years ago that we were told we had to do that? And
well,
maybe that's how
we did change it.
Well, it's funny, George, you mentioned that. I was on the phone with town council the other day about that. I said, can you get us a clear read on whether we have to do that, whether the court case insisted that we do that? And they are currently looking into it. We've talked once, and I gave them what's currently in the regs earlier today. They're going to get back to me probably in today's Tuesday, probably by Thursday afternoon with a, yes, you have to make the change. Yes, we recommend you make the change, or don't worry about it. So that is one piece in there that if we have to take it out in terms of getting a letter out tomorrow, we'll take it out. But I kind of want to see where council comes out on this first before we claim that we're making a change that we might not.
Partially in response, right? So if you're making changes in response to something else, the sentence is still accurate.
That's true.
I mean, I would still like clarity on it regardless, to George's point, because I do think we need clarity on whether the case law says you have to or not. But I think the partially in response to these conversations or whatever the wording is accurate. It's not saying completely or fully or solely in response. It's saying partially in response.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I honestly didn't know that that was a hot, is it an issue you've even had to discuss with council recently? So that's all good. Am I crazy that our 20% lot usage was kind of a response to size of house issues? I mean, we limit use of property to 20%, right? And that kind of limits the size of a house, but that wasn't really done in relation to that case?
No, that wasn't done in relation to that case. I think we do not in Darien, there's no zone that we could find that limits house size. So if someone wanted to build a 400 square foot house, that would be fine.
Yeah.
There are a few zones that limit apartment or condominium sizes, and that's what council is looking at, that question.
Okay. Good. All right, that's enough for me. Thanks. Good.
But I thought the apartment size was a maximum, no?
There's some zones that have max, some zones that have minimums. I think part of the argument of desegregate CT is by making a minimum apartment size by the very nature based on square footage, the cost would go up. By allowing smaller and smaller units, there is an opportunity for more housing diversity based on cost and apartment size.
That's the Michael Bloomberg micro apartments in Manhattan.
Or the ones we have at Garden Homes, which are
They're
400 square
tiny.
feet.
Yeah, it's tiny. Okay. So that's it. Any other questions, comments?
I would just note for the commission that the third bill referenced here, House Bill 6521, is on for public hearing this upcoming Thursday. So if we do submit, if the commission does go ahead and submit this letter tomorrow, I don't see any reason why this wouldn't be included as testimony as part of that public hearing. 6521 specifically references changes to affordable housing requirements concerning accessory dwelling units. So there's some interesting language that we pulled out of that draft bill today. And I can go ahead and circulate that to you all tomorrow so you can take a look for yourself. But this one particular bill is on for public hearing this upcoming Thursday.
Like 2 days from now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
So the goal is whatever changes you can get to us tomorrow morning, we'll revise the letter, get it out to Steve by noontime and have you sign it and get it back to us.
I don't know if anyone else has read the written testimony already submitted on the various bills. There were some really fantastic letters written and letters written by members of our own community. Definitely what struck out at me, Darien, New Canaan, Brantford, Coventry seemed to be the big areas that tended to submit the most written responses. But some of them were really, really straightforward and very compelling. So if people haven't read them, I would just, if you have some time, I don't know, I found them really interesting and there were some really thoughtful, it wasn't what there was none of the kind of silliness, like I don't know, they were very impressive. And of course, Francis Pickering wrote one, which, I'm part of his fan club. So his was great, but Betsy Garrett wrote one, which is really great. But there were some really thoughtful and interesting points of view on there. So if anyone wants to, I don't know, you have some time, I thought they were really cool. And I learned, it was interesting groups that were against bills that I was surprised at and why. So yeah.
Cool.
Just as a matter of logistics, if I may suggest, because time is short and it's a House bill, I would call Terry Wood's office and let them know that it's coming. Make sure that they're looking for it and would pay attention to it on a short-term, short notice basis.
So what I would like to do is if we could vote on this letter and authorize you guys to let me sign it as amended, because it's really the content, not the typos and the little words. So if you guys would authorize me to sign this letter, that would be great.
From you. It's not from us. It's
On
you.
me, man.
Your letter.
Yeah.
You're signing it.
I think it's a good synthesis of our thinking. Yeah.
Any objections? Do we need to?
All set.
All set. Fantastic. All right. These guys will touch up the letter. I'll sign it tomorrow. Send it off. Thank you. That's it. So any other business requires 2/3 votes, live 2/3 votes to get us out of here by 10:15. Next upcoming meeting is special meeting on March 16th.
Yeah,
What's
we're
that
going
one?
to cancel. This is the cancellation notice for March 9th, which is next week. I'm going to file it with the town. The next meeting will be March 16th, which will be the conclusion of 7-Eleven. We'll have some draft resolutions, some sets of minutes. Well, probably some other things relative to an update on the legislation as well.
You said conclusion on 7-Eleven.
That's got to be. We're out of time.
Oh, all right, good.
And then the 23rd is a very full public hearing night.
All right.
So enjoy your week off next week.
With that said, I entertain a motion to close. Jim Rand, seconded by George Riley, and a smile by everybody. All's in favor?
In favor. Aye, aye.
In favor. There we go.
See you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks, folks. Thank you.